October's a little more than a month away, so let's talk about the changing landscape over at Marvel caused by Now 2.0. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. One of the things that's going to be changing the landscape over at Marvel is their upcoming new release of comic books, and that is Marvel Now 2.0. So this is basically the previews rundown that came out a few weeks ago, probably a little over a month ago, which is going to give us the breakdown of all the different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the covers over here that appear in this book, as well as kind of run over them with you and give you kind of like my idea of where things are going, where things are coming from, and what's going to happen. So to start off with, we've got a big old spread for a checklist that's going to have everything on there that's going to be coming out. And there are some of these things that we can kind of gloss over in respect to the comic books and where things are going. These giant spreads showing the separation after Civil War II, which is really kind of a conflict that I wouldn't necessarily say is key. It's kind of artificial, but it's going to set up the landscape for Marvel moving forward. So the first book that we run into is Avengers 1.1, written by Mark Waid. And this is really kind of a throwback into an original Avengers kind of landscape. So I'm interested to see whether this is a current day setup, or since it's a 1.1 issue, whether it's some sort of outside story that deals outside of the main continuity. You know, it still might apply, but it's not really something that's relevant to current day. Then we would go to Champions number 1. So Champions number 1 signals to me a few different things. First, we know that the Division's ending after issue 12. So that's one of the things that I hope. But we see a whole bunch of different, young people, young Avengers level, X-Men level people that are going to be striking out and kind of setting their own course for superheroing, living up to a different standard, so to speak. After that, we get Occupy Avengers number 1, which shows to be a little bit more of a nitty-gritty common man kind of book, with Clinton Barton's Hawkeye leading the way. And after the events of Civil War II, where he gets acquitted for, some say, the justifiable homicide of Bruce Banner's Hulk, this could be a very interesting book about what people, what style of people rise up next to Mr. Barton in this world of Marvel. So I'm kind of curious to see where that goes. Not necessarily tops on my list, but definitely something to keep an eye on once you get a little bit more of an idea from the synopses that are going to be coming out. However, we do get to the flagship book, which is Avengers number 1, which is still written by Mark Waid. So Mark Waid is writing 3 different Avengers books. This should be interesting. We see an all different lineup. We've got, Sam Wilson's Captain America. We've got, Jane Foster's Thor. We've got the Vision leading the way. And then ultimately, it looks like we've got the Prowler, the Wasp, and Hercules. Cool. So that's an all-new Avengers book, and it should provide some very interesting takes on what it means to be an Avenger. Then you've also got the Uncanny Avengers, which is kind of more of that streamlined, standard style piece that carries on from the original Uncanny Avengers. There's no change in the numbering scheme, so it's just going to be Uncanny Avengers 15, and it's going to move forward like nothing really happened. The big change is going to come in U.S. Avengers, which is a more dedicated U.S. team where we see Squirrel Girl, the Red Hulk. There's a lot of different characters that kind of come into this, so it's going to be really interesting to see what it brings to it. Is it going to be a bit more comedic? Because, I can't think of anything funnier than the Red Hulk's mustache, because that's just, that's awesome. that's going to be a great part of the book, if it's a part of the book. So that's cool. Next, I've got Ultimates Squared. And so this is Al Ewing basically restarting the Ultimates from where it's going to leave off after Civil War II, and taking on those cosmic kind of pieces of the Marvel Universe. And that's one of the things that I find one of the most entertaining parts. It's a very small little subset, but there's some very high-level concepts, and having, very intelligent people describing this. Al Ewing's doing a very good job with that book, and I'm glad to see it continuing in one iteration or another. After Ultimates Squared, we get the Great Lakes Avengers, which is not interesting to me at all. It looks, okay, sure, cool, whatever. But that makes it easy to move on to Squadron Supreme 13, another book that's continuing its number scheme. And the real important thing that we see here is Namor. It's really what it comes down to. It's all about Namor. He's coming back. Then we go on to Thunderbolts number 7, another book that's continuing on with the same numbering scheme. And we get to see, Bucky Barnes continuing on as the man on the wall, leading this Thunderbolts team. It's a book that I got the first issue of, but I have immediately fell off because it's not for me. Next up is probably two of the more talked about books in the upcoming Marvel landscape, and that is Invincible Iron Man #1 as well as Infamous Iron Man #1. In Invincible Iron Man, we get to see Riri Williams. Wow, gotta say that real fast. Riri Williams. So we see Riri Williams taking on the role of Iron Man, or supposedly Ironheart, with various leaks coming out now, a new young Iron Man figure with a kind of mentoring Tony Stark figure in the background, as we can kind of see by the portrayal of the AI, very similar to the Jarvis, Pepper Potts kind of operating system that he has had, the Friday kind of protocol. Then in Infamous Iron Man, we see Dr. Doom, Vincent Von Doom, taking over the role of another Iron Man, and he blends the technological and the magical aspects, so that could be very interesting as well. Both are being written by Bendis, so, hopefully they're going to be very cogent, competent stories, because he's a very good writer. I just hope that he has the ability to kind of keep it on track and move those books along at a very good pace. That's probably my biggest thing. I want to see that those books continue on in a direction and at a speed that they should. Then we go to Captain Marvel #1, which is basically restarting, and she looks tyrannical, or at least that's the popular opinion. Okay, cool, sure, let's go with that. Next thing we have is Hawkeye #1, so that means that we're going to the West Coast, where our new Hawkeye, not quite new Hawkeye, but essentially the alternate Hawkeye, the Lady Hawkeye, is going to be taking over and probably laying down a little bit of justice on her own out on the West Coast. So that's a very cool book to be on the lookout for. Captain America Sam Wilson continues on with this numbering scheme, continuing at issue 14, I believe, as well as Captain America Steve Rogers, where we see the resurfacing of the Hydra Cap kind of storyline in there, as indicated by the cover, of course. And it's a book that I'm picking up hit or miss. I might collect it in trades just so that way it's all more like cohesive. It's one big unit. That's one of those books I'm going to keep my eye on as well, just to see where it kind of goes. I'm not really sold on either of them. Nick Spencer does a great job writing them. It's just that they're not necessarily the books that I'm looking forward to the most. Some more books that we see continuing on are Silver Surfer as well as Black Panther, and that's really not a surprise, especially for Black Panther, since Ta-Nehisi Coates, when he originally pitched the entire project, already had 12 issues written, and he's going to be leaving after that. It's very similar to Tom King's vision. It's 12 and kind of done thing. I feel like Black Panther is going to continue because there is that Marvel movie coming out, so they need to kind of keep that character going, but probably not with Ta-Nehisi Coates at the helm after that 12th issue. Then we go to Jessica Jones #1, which is a reintroduction of the character into her own title. We have seen her making a few appearances in the Spider-Man book, which is, Brian Michael Bendis. It's his character that he's really kind of brought into the forefront of this kind of thing, especially with a Netflix TV show. So seeing her get into her own book, that's pretty cool too. The Unstoppable Wasp is the new daughter of Hank Pym, so that's going to be a very different take on the Wasp, a much younger character, which is probably going to tie into a few of the other books, which is nice because the introduction of new young superheroes is definitely something that's necessary in Marvel. The one thing that you find about Marvel, though, is that they don't let go of the reins. They don't let new fresh characters get out and run and kind of get their legs underneath them. That's an unfortunate downfall of Marvel. They have these nice young characters, but they don't give them the support and backing that they need to kind of grow into that role, unless they're like some sort of super gangbuster success. Then Doctor Strange, under Jason Aaron's tutelage, is going to continue going on, where we see him recovering from the events of Last Day of Magic. And then Robbie Thompson brings in Doctor Strange, the Sorcerers Supreme, where Doctor Strange gets to call upon historical Ancient Ones and other fellow Sorcerer Supremes from history to kind of combat this magical, mystical kind of world event. We have Mighty Thor, which sees, Jane Foster Thor, as well as Odin's son, kind of appearing in that, and then also the Unworthy Thor. So that's a new book compared to the Mighty Thor, which is going to continue on with this numbering scheme. So the Unworthy Thor is going to be Odin's son's search for possibly another Mjolnir, some sort of other artifact that could possibly return him to his worthiness. So that's going to be an interesting tale to see, and I feel like Jason Aaron does a very good job with the Thor scheme, so seeing that story unfold should be very good until we see some point in time where maybe, the Thor books merge for some reason or another. Who knows? So Patsy Walker Hellcat continues, as well as Black Widow. Both very good books in their own right. The art style of Patsy Walker Hellcat's great, and then the writing of Mark Waid and just overall Black Widow is a very good story that's being written. It's just kind of like a not very good selling book for some reason. I don't really know why. Moon Knight is going to continue. That's pretty much a given. Jeff Lemire is doing a great job with that book. And The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl has her following. It's very, very cult kind of following. If you want an entertaining book, it's a great place to look. Becky Cloonan and The Punisher will be continuing as well as part of Marvel Now 2.0, as well as Charles Soule's Daredevil. So those are other books to kind of make sure that you check out. If you're not a fan of them already, you're probably going to want to go back and start. And if they're going to be something that you want to get into, they're not going to get any kind of restructuring, renumbering, or rebooting anytime soon. But if we're talking about new books, we want to go to Kingpin #1. So this is written by Matthew Rosenberg, and Matthew Rosenberg is writing some really hot books. So like the Civil War II Kingpin book is probably one of the best Civil War II tie-in books. He's writing Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, and overall the way that he writes the seedy underbelly of crime is very good. I like it a lot, so I'm a big fan of what he's been doing recently in those arenas. Then we go to Bullseye #1, another villains kind of story. And then Power Man and Iron Fist continue on their Heroes for Hire journey, which is nice, Overall, it's a good book. It's not one of the ones that's on my pull list, but that's just because I am overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that I pick up every week. It's crazy. Plus, I gotta be honest, the Iron Fist story that I'm really looking forward to is Iron Fist #1, which is bringing Kara Andrews back to the character in a more mentorship kind of role. So I'm really interested to see where that winds up. I really want to dive into that one head first. So that's going to be nice. Totally Awesome Hulk is going to continue on, so that's not really a worry anymore. So knowing that Totally Awesome Hulk is going to continue while Champions is going to kind of further his character along other sides, that's going to be great. Gwenpool is going to continue on in the Unbelievable Gwenpool. That's her current title. The Uncanny Inhumans is going to continue on, and in this cover we see Medusa basically denouncing all of her power, which is a little bit ridiculous because she's the queen of the Inhumans. We don't have a Black Bolt right now, which is kind of crazy that she's going to do that. But she's got another Inhuman to partner up with, I guess, in Mosaic, which is getting his first book. His introduction in Uncanny Inhumans 11 was ridiculously low run, and it was ridiculously overblown, and it's way too high priced, and it's definitely not something I would buy, but he was in there, so that's cool. Miss Marvel continues. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, which is a extremely low volume book, is continuing on at this point, and I feel like there's some sort of setup. It's going to be a situation where she is going to play a much bigger part in the Marvel Universe than what we have come to expect, which is why the stories continue to go on. It's fun, it's just that there's no real fan base support behind it, which is making it a very tough business decision, I feel, for Marvel Studios, especially if they're committing to go through it for this arc to a next arc, because that's going to be crazy. Then you've got the Death of X or IVX storyline, which is going to come along. That's Jeff Lemire that's Jeff Lemire and Charles Soule that are going to be, Jeff Lemire and Charles Soule that are going to be writing that, and they're going to alternate stories back and forth to see where that goes, because that's quite a really terrible situation. The Inhumans are essentially killing off all the mutants in the Marvel Universe, and a lot of people really don't like that whatsoever. And I hope Jeff Lemire kind of conveys that whole idea, that whole dynamic. So that's crazy. Then we have Cage #1, which is part of a 4-part series. So that's going to be him, a representation of Luke Cage. Definitely much more of a throwback, much more of a historical kind of perspective. Very unique art style. We'll go with that. Unique art style. So that's going to be an interesting book. I like the prevalence, the whole exposure that the world is getting to Luke Cage. I'm really going to be a big fan of that Netflix TV show. I really can't wait to see what they execute in that. So I'm not surprised that there's more books coming out in that respect. Same thing with things like Gamora, Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, those guys getting their own individual books, especially with the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 book, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 movie, are not really surprises. You've got a great cast of people. It's not a surprise that they're going to get their own book. Another thing that's not really a surprise is Thanos #1. So I'm stoked that Jeff Lemire is writing this, and a story of Thanos and this villainous... I love these villain books that are coming out because it gives us an independent perspective. Because if you have a well-written villain book, seeing their perspective, getting into the mind of a villain or somebody that's looking to do this conquest, you get to see their justifications. If they're not being evil just for the sake of being evil, if they have motivations that they feel like this is the only path that is left for them to achieve what they feel needs to be done, hey man, that's a much more compelling kind of story, and it gives you a lot more perspective. It's a great way to explore different parts of like the culture and the superhero culture inside this universe. So I'm all for that. Another thing that we get is the clone conspiracy, which is now dead no more, and that is the take of the Jackal. So who do you think the Jackal is, and what is he doing? It's probably Ben Reilly, and it's probably going to end mediocre. One can hope that it's awesome, and I really hope that it's awesome. But hey man, clone is a dirty word in the Marvel universe, and I'm not really... I'm going in with low expectations, so I expect Dan Slott to blow me away. That would be awesome. Silk is continuing on in her own book, which is great. I feel like the art style for the current run of books, nothing against the artist. It's just that it's not doing the book justice in respect compared to how the book started off. But hey man, it's like if they keep writing good storylines, and that's really all that matters. We also see the introduction of Prowler into his own book, so that's a #1 that's going to be coming out. We get Spider-Gwen, which is going to be continuing, Spider-Man, and these two books have that kind of implied romance between those two, so that should be interesting. Spider-Woman continues with her own book. Spider-Man 2099's got his book, and then Venom. So, Venom Space Knight, good book. It had potential. The thing is that it kind of got a little away from itself, and it got Venom away from the character that it was really supposed to be. This started all way back in like Amazing Spider-Man 949 or 951 or something like that, where Flash Thompson takes over the role of being Venom and becomes Agent Venom. Great storyline, and it got away. It got him into outer space, and it's like, I know he's an alien, but everybody loves Venom beating up on Spider-Man. So as long as this Venom is we see in the last Venom Space Knight 11, that it's Venom taking on Spider-Man. If this gets him more back into that kind of role, it's going to be a return to a lot of what people love about the character. Not that it's a bad thing to have them explore different things, but when the departure is so grand and so great, it kind of loses the people that were originally a fan of that particular character. So, you start alienating parts of your fan base. And what you need to do is you need to kind of gently coax them along on this ride. So I'm glad to see that this is kind of like a partial reset button, get him back onto Earth, get him back into what he's supposed to be doing, give him a little bit more edge. So I'm really excited about that. But if we want to talk about excited, Renew Your Vows. Yeah. So, Renew Your Vows is a book written by Jerry Conway, who had a great run on Amazing Spider-Man. It's about a poor Peter Parker. It's about Mary Jane. They're married. They've got a kid. Everybody's got spider powers. And they're all just kicking it in New York, trying to balance the day-to-day life of paying bills, working at the Daily Bugle, and being a superhero family. And that's going to be awesome. I don't care what you say. It's probably going to sell as much or more than the Amazing Spider-Man book because it is such a throwback. You have to go back over a decade to find a moment where this story would have been the through line. It would have been the final part of that continuity. You've got to go back to like Civil War kind of era in order to get this kind of storytelling from the Amazing Spider-Man. Not that, Dan Slott's had a really bad run, but ultimately this is what people, say like my age, people my age grew up with Peter Parker and Mary Jane together, and it was just like, as, say like J. Michael Straczynski's run came up, and a bunch of other runs in that area, they made Peter Parker grow up with us. We have an idea that we can identify with him. He was dealing with much more mature and adult themes, and you can't get much more mature and adult than being married and having a kid, and having them all have spider powers. So, Peter Parker, this is going to be a great book. I really am excited for what this book brings, and it's going to be interesting to see where, this is a put your money where your mouth is kind of thing, because people have been screaming for this kind of continuity for ages. So it's a book that I feel like is going to sell just as well, if not maybe a little bit better than the main Amazing Spider-Man run, simply because it's going to touch a nerve. It's going to touch some nostalgic sensibilities, and if it's well executed, it could cause some very serious questions to be asked to the Marvel editorial staff regarding why they hadn't done something like this sooner. It's one of those things, man, that I hope that it's really successful, and I can't wait to see what it's all about. Then after that, we get into Deadpool and his book, and then, Deadpool and the Mercs for Money, which is, there's a whole hell of a lot of Deadpool going on. I picked up some of the books. They're okay. Not necessarily my favorite picks, but they're definitely okay. So, if you're a fan, more power to you. Then you've got the kind of offshoots from Deadpool and the Mercs for Money and all those kind of things. So you've got like Slapstick, you've got Solo, you've got Fool Killer. So those are books where people are like, so what made this book a success? Let's just put out all three, and whichever one sells the most, that's the one that made it happen. And that's very frustrating, which brings the other part of this whole kind of Marvel reboot, restructuring, relaunching of various titles. Man, you gotta make creative decisions for creative purposes. You gotta tell good stories. The essence of what sells a comic book is a combination of great art that represents good story and a combination of good dialogue, good words, and good premise. There's an arc, there's a feel that there's a destination. There's some place that this is going. And if you don't have a destination, people sense that. They're like, wow, this is just treading water. It's going nowhere. It's just here for the purpose of being here. So what they need to do is, if this is the proving grounds, what they need to do is they need to give some of these characters, some of these books, legs. They need to let them succeed or fail on their own, and then reappropriate talent so that they can give those books the support that they need. While Marvel is a great publishing house, what you're seeing is like these DC Rebirth books are very well executed, and they're taking the top sales slots, not just because they're number ones or number twos or number threes, and they're reintroductions of new characters, but because they're telling really good stories. And that's the key. So if Marvel can kind of use this as a way to flesh out what are the best current stories, and then continue on that path and kind of like let the stuff that doesn't necessarily succeed fall to the wayside and build upon what becomes the structure of the new Marvel universe, I think that it's going to be a success. Fingers crossed that they can tell some great stories along the way, because that's the ultimate hope for everything. Nothing against any kind of creators or anything like that, but sometimes it's just not your day, man. And I wish everybody in here the best, but there are definitely some books in here that I think that are going to fall on their face real hard and are going to absolutely just flop. And then there are books in here that I'm like, okay, cool, that sounds interesting. So, we'll see what happens in October. So that's my rundown of Marvel Now 2.0 and where I think things are kind of going, what I think is going to be good, what I think is going to be bad. But I want to hear what you feel, so hit me up in the comments down below. We can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.